Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So first, let's take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the international edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a total of 11 articles. We actually have a series of articles related to environment and ecology on page number 8 and 9. I'm going to club all these articles together and carry out a detailed analysis to mark the World Earth Day, which is celebrated on 22nd of April. So on this important day, the Hindu has brought out 5 important columns which deal with climate change, environmental damage and sustainable development. So I'm going to club all these articles together and we are going to discuss these 5 columns comprehensively. Then we have a number of small articles that are more important for the prelims exam. So let's ensure that we cover all these articles as comprehensively as possible so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking the initiative, do let us know in the comments, do press the like button. Now before we start, I have another important announcement. Starting from today, I will be beginning a new series, a free special class on the Unacademy app. Because I've been receiving a lot of requests from students that they don't exactly understand the term geopolitics. When it comes to international relations, many students have confusion about the term geopolitics. What does it mean? You often come across the term in various newspapers, in articles, but you may not understand what exactly is geopolitics. So to simplify the topic and to make it interesting as well, we'll be starting with a special series from today. Starting from today, the series will continue until 30th of April. It's a limited series of around 7 classes. And the series will go live at 1 p.m. on these days. The session will be from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. So we are going to discuss the impact of geography on international relations of different regions. That's exactly what you mean by geopolitics. Geopolitics is the study of geography of a place and how it influences the international relations of that place. So we will analyze the geopolitics of different regions, understand how geography plays a critical role in South Asia, in Indian Ocean, and in other parts of the world like West Asia and Central Asia, Southeast Asia and East Asia, Africa, Europe and the Americas region, and even polar areas and as well as outer space. How geography, both physical and human geography, how does it define international relations? That is the theme of this series. So do attend these classes live starting from today at 1 p.m. and the link is provided in the video description. You can also find the link later in the community section and also on the Telegram channel. Then coming to Conquer Prelims crash course, which has already started. Today we will have class number 4 on Indian Polity by Sarmad Mehraj sir at 6 p.m. And again, you can find the link in our Telegram channel. Just subscribe to our Telegram channel and when the session goes live, the links will be shared. So with this, I would like to begin today's discussion and first talk about today's important occasion, which is the World Earth Day. 22nd of April every year is marked as World Earth Day. It's a day which has been set aside to highlight environmental issues and to mobilize global support for environment conservation. So first, let's understand the background because there could be a prelims question on World Earth Day itself. Then after that, we will take up the 5 columns on page number 8 and 9, club them together one by one and have a comprehensive discussion on these important environmental issues. The World Earth Day is being celebrated since 1970. It began as a collective people-led movement in the United States. It has its origin in the US because by 1960s, there were concerns being expressed in the United States that environmental issues are not being given priority. After the Second World War, as US witnessed massive industrial growth and development, it led to large-scale pollution, large-scale destruction of environment and biodiversity. Air pollution had gone up, water bodies were getting polluted, resources were getting overexploited, disasters were occurring, such as oil spills. So these incidents throughout 1950s and 1960s, it inspired few American intellectuals, thinkers, and activists to come together and mobilize support to focus on environmental problems, to highlight the environmental challenges so that governments and global institutions can also prioritize environmental action. Because until then, even the global community and even governments weren't paying much attention to environmental challenges. The United Nations, that had been set up in 1945, as part of the UN Charter, it had taken a commitment to focus on environmental issues. But apart from that, there had been no other concrete effort by governments and global institutions to focus on environment protection. So this people-led movement, which began in the US, it inspired a global movement later. By 1970, April 22nd was established as the World Earth Day as a result of this movement that started in the US. So there were many contributors behind this. For example, Senator Gaylord Nelson. He would highlight the environmental problems following a massive oil spill in Santa Barbara. It was one of the biggest environmental disasters that we have witnessed. So this led several students in college campuses in the US to mobilize and come together and conduct these special classes or sessions in campuses to spread awareness about environmental issues. So that is how the movement began. And April 22nd was the day on which the first such grouping was held. A group session in various American colleges, universities, and campuses was held under the leadership of several activists. So since then, it became a regular feature. In 1969, they even approached UNESCO to designate the day as World Earth Day. And finally, when they held the event in 1970 on 22nd April, since then, it has been designated as World Earth Day. So it has mobilized more than 1 billion people around the world. It is marked every single year. And it is so significant that, in fact, it was on this day that the Paris Agreement was signed in 2016. That shows the importance assigned to World Earth Day even by governments and global institutions. When the Paris Agreement was negotiated in 2015, during the 2015 Conference of Parties to the Climate Change Convention, it was opened for signature next year in 2016, and it was signed on this day, on April 22nd, to mark World Earth Day. So that shows how important this particular day is as far as environmental conservation is concerned. So on this occasion, the Hindu is carrying these important columns by various experts. So let's look at these articles one by one, and we will examine the issues that the article is trying to highlight. We will take a broad look at these articles, understand what issues and challenges the writers are presenting, and also discuss the possible way forward to tackle these environmental problems. On page number 8, we have this article that specifically focuses on water stress and the need for climate resilience. The writers are mainly talking about the impact of global warming and climate change and destruction of our water bodies and water systems, which is leading to water stress, not just in India, but around the world. For example, look at the critical water shortage in Bengaluru. Look at Niti Aayog's report, which says that by 2040, most Indian cities might run out of groundwater. Look at the reservoirs in India. Majority of the reservoirs are not even filled to 38 or 48% of its capacity. It shows the extent to which we have mismanaged our water systems. And it's very important to conserve and protect the water systems because climate change is going to directly affect the availability of water. As climate change increases extreme weather events, as it leads to more floods, droughts, and cyclones, it will disrupt the water systems, and if we do not focus on water conservation and efficient management of water, we will be under severe water stress. So that is why the writers are calling upon governments and the communities to work together to build climate resilience, to conserve the ecosystems and protect the water systems in particular. Now for India, this is extremely important given the size of our population. India houses 18% of the world's population. We are the most populous country in the world with more than 1.4 billion people. We account for just 2.4% of the Earth's surface area. But if you look at the availability of freshwater resources in India, it is just 4% of the global freshwater resources. So this data itself is very, very important. You can actually use this in your answers. We only have 4% of the world's freshwater resources, and that has to provide water for 18% of the world's population. So there is a huge mismatch. And upon that, we have polluted our water bodies. Most rivers in India are extremely polluted, from the Ganga to the Kaveri river. Almost every major river in India is facing a severe threat due to excessive pollution. Industrial waste, industrial effluents, then urban sewage is directly let into our water bodies. There is very poor water management and water treatment. Then we have agricultural residue, which is directly flowing into our water bodies. Excessive use of fertilizers, pesticides, it's leaching all the toxins directly into our water bodies, polluting them. We are destroying our lakes and wetlands, mainly through encroachment, through illegal encroachment, through rampant urbanization, and as well as the construction real estate mafia in urban areas. They have taken over lake beds, wetlands, and the catchment area of drainage basins and built apartments and shopping malls and whatnot. And today we are standing at the precipice of a disaster in India. A critical water shortage in India is no longer just a future fantasy or just a future threat. It is a reality as of today itself. Plus, we have overexploited our groundwater resources. If you look at India's dependency on groundwater, right, we stand out when we compare ourselves to other countries. We are the largest user of groundwater resources in the world. And unfortunately, most of the underground aquifers have been exhausted or they have been overexploited. So this is something that we need to address on a priority basis. The governments, the central and state governments, the people as well, right? And even the civil society in general, NGOs, private entities, they all have to collectively play a role to conserve and protect our water resources. We need to provide for recharging of our groundwater table, right? This is something we address through better urbanization, better planning in our urban development. We need to protect critical ecosystems from rivers to lakes to wetlands. We have to prevent illegal encroachment, clear illegal encroachment, and ensure that we focus on water conservation, from rainwater harvesting to ensuring that we don't waste water, right? So all these practices have to be inculcated. It requires policy changes. It requires structural changes. It requires financial commitment from the government. So that is exactly what the writers are talking about. Now, please look at this last point. The UN World Water Development Report, brought out in 2020, states that 75% of the natural disasters that are occurring, they are water-related disasters. Is that clear? Essentially, cyclones, floods, right, and other such water-related disasters, they account for 75% of all the natural disasters that are occurring, according to this UN Water Development Report. Now, what does this tell you? It tells us that it's not that we have a water shortage. There is sufficient water, right? Climate change is driving these changes. It's driving these more frequent, more intense extreme weather events. The problem is we are not efficiently managing our water systems. We are not protecting ourselves against the impact of these disasters. So we have to focus on mitigating the disasters, build resilience in our communities to make them climate proof, to ensure that our communities can withstand the impact of the disasters while we efficiently manage the water that is available to reduce the water stress. So this is what we learn from this important article. Next, on the same page, we have an article related to the rights of indigenous communities and how it can conflict with the need for environment conservation. The writers are specifically referring to a recent development in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. As you know, Andaman Nicobar Islands of India is blessed with great biodiversity, right? It's part of a biodiversity hotspot as well. It is blessed with mangrove forests, coral reefs. It has one of the finest biodiversity flora and fauna present in the island region. So here, the government of India has recently proposed the establishment of 3 new protected areas. The government of India is looking to establish 3 wildlife sanctuaries, right, with protected area status. And the focus here is on conserving the environment, protecting the biodiversity. But the problem is the manner in which the government is approaching this issue is what creates concerns for the writers. The writers are pointing out that these places which have been chosen, right, they are home to indigenous communities, or at least it is extremely critical or crucial for the indigenous communities in Andaman and Nicobar. And the worst part is they have not been even consulted by the government. The government hasn't bothered to get their consent. It hasn't opened any negotiations or dialogues with them because establishment of such protected areas could lead to the displacement of people. It could affect traditional forest rights of these communities. So let's understand which are these islands and what kind of protected areas are proposed and which community stands to get affected by these projects. See, the projected idea is to establish these reserves in the southern part of Andaman Nicobar. As you know, Andaman Nicobar is an archipelago of islands, right? In the Little Nicobar region in South Andaman Nicobar. That is where the proposal has been brought up by the government. There are few islands here which are actually uninhabited. They have no living population on the island itself, but it is very crucial for a native indigenous community that actually depends on it. The indigenous community is known as the Payu tribe or the Payu people. So for them, these 2 islands, which are officially called as Mero and Menchel, in local tribal language, they are known as Pirui and Pingyak, respectively. These are the 2 islands in the Little Nicobar group which have been chosen by the government for establishing these protected areas. Couple of years ago, a notification was issued by the government of India and the administrative authority of the Union Territory, and it notified that 3 specific places have been chosen here for establishing certain protected areas. So let's take a look at which are these protected areas. One is a proposed coral sanctuary for protecting the coral reefs at the Mero Island. Second is a megapod sanctuary at Menchel Island. And finally, a leatherback turtle sanctuary on Little Nicobar. Now, these projects, they might be required to protect the species as well, right? It does serve the purpose of environment protection. But the point is, has the government taken into account the traditional rights of the indigenous communities and the symbiotic relationship that indigenous people share with their environment and their nature? Because see, in the past, India has established several protected areas. It has enforced several environmental laws. But unfortunately, in most cases, it has negatively affected the indigenous communities and forest-dwelling tribes. So here the writer is urging the government to not repeat those mistakes and injustices. For example, if you look at central and eastern India or northeast India, various environmental laws have impacted the local communities in an adverse manner. It has even created resentment amongst the forest-dwelling tribes, and it has even contributed to the rise of extremism in central, eastern and northeastern India. The writers are urging the government to ensure that they work with the local people, understand their concerns, their grievances, obtain their consent, bring them on board, make them stakeholders in the project, because tribal communities play a critical role in conservation of ecosystems. You look at any tribal community in the world, any indigenous community, they have a very sustainable relationship with their forests and their environment. Is that clear? You look at Northeast India, you look at Andaman Nicobar Islands, right? There are many ethnic groups, native indigenous tribes. They literally worship the forest. They have a lot of spiritual value, cultural value assigned to animals, plants, birds and trees. They worship the mountains and the rivers. They take care of their environment, they protect them, and they never overexploit. Because they know that their sustenance, their well-being, their livelihood is entirely dependent on the forest itself. So they never overexploit. They take what is needed, and in return they protect the environment. So this is a sacred symbiotic relationship that exists. If you look at the Paiute people, the Paiute indigenous community in Mero and Menchal Island, right? They have a lot of spiritual value associated with these islands. It is uninhabited. The Paiute people don't reside here. They reside in Little Nicobar. But they visit the island regularly. They have spiritual, religious value attached to it, and they play a very important role in conserving and protecting the environment around here, including the critical species present here. But if the government doesn't recognize that, and if the government simply steps in and it tries to just establish these sanctuaries and reserves without involvement of local communities, then that could be gross injustice done to the community. It could even hamper environment conservation. Because it's always important to get the local communities on board and give them a role as well. Give them a community role to manage and conserve the forests and the ecosystems. So that is what the writers are requesting. Right? They're pointing out that the government has not consulted with the indigenous tribe. The government is simply pushing through these projects. Right? And what's ironic is that if in South Andaman these environmental initiatives are being pushed, in other parts of Andaman, infrastructure projects are being pushed. Civilian and military infrastructure projects. Of course, those projects are necessary for strategic reasons, security reasons, and economic reasons. But that cannot lead to a compromise on environmental values and traditional forest rights of tribal communities. Any responsible government needs to strike a balance between these conflicting objectives. So that is what the writers are calling for. That's what we understand from this important article. Next, on page number 9, we have a column that is related to the challenges associated with renewable energy. Now, as you know, the world is moving towards net zero emissions. Around the world, the focus is on moving towards net zero emissions, where we can reach a stage where we match the absorption of greenhouse gases with the emission, right, and essentially achieve a status of net zero. So several developed countries from US to Europe, they have set an ambitious target that by 2045, 2050, by the middle of the century, they want to achieve net zero emissions. Countries like China have sought more time. China has set a target for itself. By 2060, it wants to become a net zero economy. Similarly, India also has set a target by 2070. India's voluntary target is to become a net zero economy by 2070. So right now, around the world, there is great focus on decarbonizing the economies. In order to achieve net zero emissions, right, there are two things that has to be done. One, you decarbonize and reduce the emissions. You reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And second, you increase carbon sequestration. You plant more trees, you create more carbon sinks, or even experiment with other geoengineering methods and solar radiation management techniques to try and cut down global warming and climate change. Right? These are the options available. So one important idea with regard to decarbonizing the economies and to reduce emissions is to move away from fossil fuels, to adopt clean and renewable energy. So there is a lot of focus on shifting towards clean and renewable energy, and India is one of the pioneers as well, right? So options like solar, wind power, electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, they have become the focus of the global economy today. In fact, the global economy is largely being driven by technologies related to clean and renewable energy. So here, the writers are pointing out that even though a shift is necessary, even though we have to move away from fossil fuels and adopt cleaner forms of energy, the writers are asking the governments to be mindful of the environmental impact of renewable energy as well. Because there are challenges when it comes to implementing renewable energy projects. Take, for example, solar projects or solar farms which are being set up. In India and even in other countries, massive solar farms are being created in arid, semi-arid regions, in deserts, or wherever enough space is available and enough sunshine is available, right? There is a focus on creating these massive solar farm facilities. So while these projects are necessary, it's important to keep in mind the concerns of the local people again. Because this could lead to land acquisition, it could lead to displacement of people, it could have adverse environmental consequences as well. Because please understand, even renewable energy is not entirely clean. For example, let's say a shift towards electric vehicles will not automatically end air pollution, right? It will not end greenhouse gas emissions. It will in fact even contribute to new types of emissions. It will definitely bring down fossil fuel based emissions, but in production of electric vehicles, in production of the batteries, in mining the resources like lithium, cobalt, etc., right? They will all contribute to large scale emissions as well. So your clean and renewable energy is not as clean as you think. Be it solar, be it hydropower, be it electric vehicles or wind, they have their own carbon footprint. So writers are simply asking the government, especially India, to keep in mind the environmental consequences and as well as the social consequences. Of course, a shift towards clean renewable energy is necessary, it is needed. They're not opposing it. But one has to be mindful of the consequences. You can't be under the assumption that clean renewable energy is completely free from any risks and challenges. These large-scale projects could again lead to displacement of people. For example, many decades ago when India started building large dams and hydropower projects, right? It led to displacement of people. Farmers and even tribal communities for large tracts of land was acquired for these mega projects, public projects, and many communities were displaced. They weren't even adequately compensated. So that should not repeat. That shouldn't happen again. The social consequences has to be managed along with the environmental risks and challenges associated with these projects. So it's a caution by the writers that even clean technologies, they may not be as clean as it is projected to be. Even they have a downside, and that is something we need to keep in mind, and the policy makers especially, right? Those who are in power, they should be mindful of these consequences and strike a balance between the conflicting objectives. Next, we have another interesting article on the same page, which highlights the need to take our children, our school-going children, right into the midst of nature to promote nature-based learning. The writers are mainly talking about the importance of sensitizing the young generation, the importance of training the young generation and promoting environmental awareness amongst them right from the school level. See, right now, if you look at our schooling system, right, environmental issues are included in the curriculum. You take any NCERT textbook, any primary school textbook. So environmental issues do get a priority, right? They do explain the importance of protecting the environment, the importance of our resources, the threats being faced from pollution to climate change. Everything is part of the curriculum, right? It's there in the textbooks. Teachers teach that. Students, hopefully they learn that as well. But the writers here are asking, is it sufficient? Is it enough? Is theoretical knowledge in a classroom, right? Is it sufficient? That too in India, where our educational standards are highly questionable, right? If you look at a majority of the schools, government schools and even a lot of private schools in India, right? They may not really inculcate the right knowledge, the right spirit. It may be part of the curriculum. They might be teaching it for the sake of it. But the question is, are the children really learning about the environment? Are they really environment conscious? Right? So that is a very important question the writers are raising here. So what they suggest is that they're suggesting nature-based learning, which is usually not seen in India. I'll explain what is nature-based learning. You often see this in Western countries, in, let's say, Australia or US or even in Europe. School children from a very young age, even from kindergarten or even from preschool days, they are taken out into the open. They are taken into parks, open fields, agricultural farms, or even into forests and protected areas. And they are given a hands-on experience, a practical field experience. This is largely missing in India's educational system. Correct? If you have any relatives in, let's say, in these countries, and if they have a kid, just talk to them about how nature-based learning is inculcated as part of the curriculum. They not just learn in the classroom, not just the theory, but they are taken outside, right? To work with animals, to work with plants, to be part of nature, to be part of the environment. That physical experience right from the young formative days is critical to build that consciousness regarding environment protection. So that is what the column is asking for. In India, we should focus on building nature-based learning. There are exceptions in India. There are few schools which have inculcated this of late. But majority of them, particularly the government schools, they don't give enough priority to this. Right? Even the theory being taught in class is of very poor standard, and there is absolutely no practical experience. So taking the children right into the nature, taking them outside of the classroom, right, during the class hours itself, taking them to the agricultural fields, to the forest, to the wetlands, and making them learn, making them experience, and then teaching them about the value of the environment, teaching them about pollution, climate change right there on the field will play a bigger role in making the future generation more environment conscious. So that is the suggestion being provided here. Now this article is referring to something very important, a very important fact, which could be important for prelims. Please make a note of this. The article is referring to 9 natural processes of the earth, which have been selected as critical processes for sustaining life on earth. This was done by the Earth Commission. The Earth Commission is a collective group of scientists and researchers from around the world who are part of the Global Commons Alliance. It's an international forum of top environmental scientists, researchers, and social scientists, and they are part of the Global Commons Alliance. Essentially, they look at protection of the global commons. It could be the polar areas, space, our environment. These are resources that belong to everyone, not to any specific country. They treat water, they treat all the resources as part of the global commons. We might have drawn these imaginary boundaries and defined sovereignty, but nature has no sovereignty, it has no boundaries such as these. So there is a global collective, a grouping of scientists and researchers who focus on protecting the global commons, right? So within this, there is a commission called the Earth Commission. The Earth Commission identified 9 critical processes that are essential for sustainability of Earth. In order to ensure that our planet is stable, to ensure it is worthy of holding life, and to ensure it is resilient against threats and disasters. There are 9 processes that they have identified. Basically, they have identified these geochemical processes. So let's see what are those processes. One is climate change, right? Climate change occurs naturally as well, apart from the anthropogenic factors which contribute to it. Biosphere integrity, protecting the integrity of the biosphere, that is crucial, because once we cross the red line, once we destroy our biospheres, right, which contains both living and non-living organisms and objects, right, once we cross the limits here, it could lead to irreversible damage, just like climate change could get irreversible beyond a certain point. then land system change, fresh water use, biogeochemical flows, ocean acidification, atmospheric aerosol pollution, stratospheric ozone depletion, and the release of novel chemicals. These are the 9 processes that the Earth Commission has identified, which is critical for ensuring the stability and resilience of Earth. Is that clear? Please make a note of this. It can come as a straightforward question, a prelims question. And according to the researchers, we have already crossed the boundary on 6 of these processes out of 9. Meaning, because of man-made activities, anthropogenic activities, we have breached the red lines. We have already disturbed biogeochemical flows, for example. Right? In school, you would have studied about biogeochemical cycles. The nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, right? Even the carbon cycle, etc., where these nutrients are cycled and circulated in the environment, right? Through various biological and geological processes. But human intervention, anthropogenic activities, has already disrupted the biogeochemical flows. Same goes for atmospheric aerosol pollution. Large-scale burning of fossil fuels has released tremendous amount of aerosols and particulate matter, which has polluted our atmosphere, right? So these are areas where we have breached the red lines already. Be it stratospheric ozone depletion due to CFCs and other ozone depleting substances. We had damaged and destroyed large part of the polar ozone layer. Now, thanks to Montreal Protocol, right, we have been able to recover part of it, and ozone hole is on its way to recovery. But still, we have disrupted these processes, which is absolutely critical for stability with regard to Earth and for ensuring that Earth is resilient. So the Earth Commission has pointed out that out of the 9 processes which are critical, we have already crossed the red line on 6 of them. So what the writer is suggesting is that we should prioritize these concepts in our schooling system. We should make our children understand through nature-based learning the importance of these 9 processes and how we can reverse the damage that we have caused. So that is the core argument being made by the writers of this column. Now, coming to the 5th and final article. The article talks about understanding the connections that exist between climate change, environment protection, food security, and gender-based and social-based issues. All these things are interrelated. They're all interconnected. Now, see, for example, the more we destroy the environment, right, then the more we contribute to climate change and global warming, it will affect agriculture, it will affect food production, eventually it will affect food security and nutrition, right? And this will quickly turn into social problems, especially the poor people, the weaker sections, right, and even women, right, who face gender-based discrimination. They will be at the receiving end of the impact of these changes, right? Economic changes and environmental changes will contribute to social changes as well. So the writers of this column are urging governments to focus on the interconnections that exist. Addressing environmental issues, right? It's not just about conserving the environment or biodiversity. It's about focusing on the economic impact. It's about minimizing the social impact of these adverse changes that are already taking place. Correct? Now, for example, the frequency and intensity of disasters have gone up according to several studies. We are witnessing record temperatures, record heat waves, right? Disastrous floods. I'm sure you know the examples as well, right? From Dubai to China, there have been devastating incidents in the recent past itself. So given this fact, it's very important to focus on the linkages that exist and protect our agricultural systems, our food systems, to guarantee nutrition, to guarantee food security, right? Or else, this will have a detrimental impact on the economy, and it will have a huge impact on the social well-being as well. So here, the writers are mentioning the Rome Declaration on Nutrition, which I feel is a very important point for your prelims. According to the Rome Declaration on Nutrition, right, they underscored the challenges for existing food systems in providing food security as a result of increasing climate risk. The Rome Declaration on Nutrition pointed this out very clearly, that there is a risk for food security in the coming years, and this could have detrimental economic and social consequences. According to the Rome Declaration, 800 million people already are suffering from inequitable access to food. They're not getting sufficient food and nutrition. 2 billion people suffer from deficiencies of micronutrients like iron and zinc, right? These deficiencies leads to various disorders. It affects their health and it further pushes them into poverty. So it's a vicious cycle that gets created if food security is not addressed. The Rome Declaration also pointed out that food systems currently are not very sustainable. For example, you look at the cultivation of rice, cultivation of sugarcane. These are highly water-intensive crops. But our economic systems have been built in such a way that we incentivize such inefficient crops which are harmful to the environment. Rice and sugarcane, right, they get tremendous support. That is paddy and sugarcane. They get tremendous support from governments. It's one of the largest agricultural commodities that we produce around the world. But it's extremely harmful for the environment. It overexploits water, right, leads to depletion of groundwater as well. And more importantly, it contributes to methane emissions. It's a greenhouse gas. It adds to global warming. You look at the animal husbandry that we practice, right, especially the ruminant category of cattle. They are responsible for a large percentage of methane emissions. So writer is pointing out that the current agricultural systems, food systems, it's not very efficient. It's not very environment friendly. We need to change this path. We need to move away from these unsustainable paths and adopt more traditional and sustainable methods of farming and cultivation. This will not only help us in dealing with climate change, it will also help us guarantee food security, thus protect our economic systems and social systems. So that is the underlying argument of this important article. So I hope you guys have understood everything, right? There were 5 columns related to World Earth Day, dealing with different aspects of environment, economy and social issues. What I've done is we have taken them one by one, clubbed them together, and we have had a elaborate discussion on these topics. So you can expect mains questions here, maybe a essay topic as well, right? So I hope the discussion has been useful. Now let's head towards the prelim section and look at the smaller articles in today's newspaper. We have this article on page number 3 that refers to the recent breakout of avian influenza in the state of Kerala. The article says that in the Alappuzha region, there has been a breakout of H5N1. It's one of the subtypes of avian flu, also called avian influenza. It belongs to influenza type A. So let's understand few basic details about avian flu or avian influenza and H5N1. See, this is also called as bird flu, right, or avian influenza, and as the name itself tells you, this primarily affects birds, both wild birds and as well as cultivated birds such as poultry. It is a viral infection. It is something which is very contagious. It spreads very quickly, very easily amongst birds. So there are a variety of strains under avian influenza. When we say avian influenza or bird flu or avian flu, right, it refers to an entire family of viruses which infect wild birds and poultry. There are different strains that cause the infection. So one subtype is H5N1. H5N1 is a type of avian flu that belongs to influenza A virus family. All right, it's a subtype under influenza A virus family. Now, these pathogens, they primarily affect birds. They affect wild birds. Migratory birds carry them across countries and across regions. And poultry, which comes in contact with the wild birds, could get easily infected. And within the poultry farms, it will spread rapidly. So one way of tackling the spread is to try and quarantine a section of the infected birds, identify them, and the one option is to cull the birds. That is to exterminate them so that it doesn't lead to a further larger breakout. Now, there is one major concern here. The concern is not just about the impact on the bird population and poultries and the impact on agriculture and economy. There is a great potential here for these group of viruses to further mutate, right, and make a zoonotic jump. That is, jump to humans. There have been cases, there have been outbreaks around the world where humans have contracted the infection, especially H5N1. Usually it is known only to affect birds, but those who are in close contact with the infected birds. For example, let's say there is a poultry farm. Those who are managing the poultry farm, those who are cleaning the excreta of the birds, those who are involved in culling these birds or in slaughtering these birds, who come in contact with the fluids from blood to excreta to urine, they are at great risk of contracting the infection, and there have been quite a few cases in China, in US, in India as well, where few humans have contracted H5N1 strain of avian influenza. But fortunately, as of now, human-to-human transmission is very difficult. All right? Human-to-human transmission as of now, that is person-to-person transmission, is very difficult. But in the future, there is a possibility where the viruses could further mutate, develop the ability to propagate more quickly, spread quickly, right, from humans to humans. So this is something which is being watched out by researchers and the scientific community around the world, because there is no vaccine as such for avian influenza, right? Birds are not treated. On such a large scale, birds can't be treated. That's why birds are culled. The infected birds and any other bird which is part of that flock, which is at the risk of infection, they are all put to mass culling or mass extermination, right? So there is no way of treating it or preventing it as of now. So the goal should be to further study the disease, right, and not just prevent the economic impact and the environmental impact, but also to keep a watch on its possible epidemic or pandemic potential. So that is why avian influenza and especially H5N1 strain is of concern. Next, on page number 4, we have an article referring to the Kashmiri carpet and rugs. The article itself is not relevant. It's about a massive Kashmiri carpet which has been handmade by the artisans in Kashmir, which is being exported to a Middle Eastern country. But what is important for us is the product itself and the Kashmiri handicraft industry itself. Because Kashmiri carpets are very unique, very popular, it's known for its intricate artwork and its fine quality, and it has even been provided with a GI tag. Geographical indication tag has been provided to Kashmiri carpets. So this has increased the export potential of Kashmiri carpets, right? So Kashmiri artisans who specialize in carpet making and rug making, they use the finest quality of Pashmina wool, right, from the Pashmina goats which are available in Kashmir Valley, and they hand weave these carpets. So it's a handloom industry, it's a handicraft industry. And this is specific to the region, the skill, the artwork, the quality of the product, it is specific to Kashmir. So any such product, right, which traces its value or its quality or its in general its uniqueness, right, or even its reputation to a particular geographical place or a geographical region, such products can be provided with intellectual property rights. It can be given a tag called the GI tag, geographical indication tag. So this form of intellectual property recognition, right, it has global recognition. It's recognized under the Paris Convention for Protection of Industrial Property and also under the TRIPS Agreement of the WTO, Trade-Related Intellectual Property Rights Agreement, TRIPS Agreement of WTO. Just like you have patents, copyrights, trademarks. Similarly, one type of intellectual property is GI tag or geographical indication tag. So from India, there are hundreds of products that have a GI tag, and especially the ones which have been recently given the GI tag can be important for the exam. So Kashmiri carpets were given the GI tag just 2 years ago in 2022. Now the advantage of getting a GI tag is that, one, it will serve as a certificate of quality, right? Let's say a product, right, which is associated to a certain region. Its uniqueness, its quality, reputation, its value, everything is assigned to a certain geographical location. So such products, when they are given the tag and when they are assigned with intellectual property protection, right, it becomes a symbol of quality. It's a certification of quality. And others can't replicate this. It would be legally prohibited for others to copy and brand and sell these products, right? The people of the region, the artisans or people involved in producing that product or commodity, they will benefit. It will create more opportunities for them. It will widen the market available for them. It will bring more income for such communities, right? Plus, it guarantees the quality of the product. It provides legal protection, an exclusive right. It prevents the misuse of the brand name. Others can't falsify the product and claim to produce the product from other regions. So that is why it is a type of intellectual property. There is legal recourse available as well. If someone violates the GI trademark, right, the GI tag which has been provided, if there is an infringement or if there is a unfair competition from someone else, the associations here in a particular region, they can contest and they can take legal action against those who are committing such frauds. So it provides protection for the product. It protects the artisans, the people, the community involved in its manufacturing or production. And more importantly, it's helpful for the customer, right? Because this is a seal of quality, a certification of quality. This will widen the market. It will increase the opportunities as well. So that is why GI tags are very important. Next, on page number 4, there is an image carried by the Hindu depicting tea plantation workers in Assam. There's something important to understand from this image. You may think it's not relevant for the exam, but let me point out. The image here is referring to the contribution of Assam to India's tea production. Now, this could be a direct fact in your prelims question, because Assam's tea industry is world famous. It has a 200-year history, a 2-century-old history behind it. Right? Assam has the perfect soil condition, the perfect climate and terrain for tea cultivation. There are 2 major regions in Assam where tea is cultivated. One is Brahmaputra Valley, the other is Barak Valley. Please make a note of this. Brahmaputra Valley and the Barak Valley. These are the 2 hubs in Assam for tea cultivation. Right? For example, if you look at the Bodo inhabited areas, the Bodo districts, and even to the south of Guwahati, right, and to the north of the Brahmaputra Valley, right? These are places where you have the perfect ideal condition for growing tea, and this was first identified by a British official. Right? During the British era, the colonial era, Robert Bruce, a colonial officer, right, he figured out that wild tea plants grow very well in this climate, in this terrain. This was in 1823, 200 years ago. So following that, British enterprises, they expressed a lot of interest to commercialize the crop, and they very quickly established massive tea plantations all across Assam. Right? And to run these plantations, they needed cheap labor. They brought various central Indian tribes to make them work as tea plantation workers. For example, Santals and Mundas, right? Many of them were transported here by the British from central and eastern India. They were brought here to Assam to work in the tea plantation industry. And today, it's a lifeline for the economy of Assam. All right, India produces 23% of the world's tea production, and more than half of it is coming from Assam. That is the important fact you should know. 23% of the global tea production is coming from India. All right? And 50% of it is coming from Assam alone. Assam alone contributes to nearly 50% of India's tea production. Now, please find out which are the other major tea producing states in India and mention that in the comment section below. Next article from page number 7, it's referring to mpox or monkeypox virus. The article is talking about a new genomic study which has brought out some new information about how the monkeypox virus infects humans and spreads from one human to another. All right, recently mpox caused a global scare. In the last 2 years itself, there have been mpox outbreaks in certain parts of the world, and you should know what is the monkeypox virus. Just the basic details. So it is a viral disease. It is a viral pathogen which causes the disease, and there have been incidents of zoonotic spillover, meaning humans have been infected. But the reservoir of this virus is usually rodents or primates. That's why it's called monkeypox, named after the monkey, because primates are the major hosts or reservoirs of the pathogen along with rodents. So when humans come in contact with them, or when you're bitten by, let's say, these infected rodents or primates which are acting as reservoirs, right? That is when the spread happens. First case of human transmission was detected here in DRC, in Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo. The concern here is that mortality rate is very high. Same with H5N1 as well. Please note that down. It's very rare that humans get infected by H5N1 and mpox. But if infected, mortality rates are very high. There's no treatment, no vaccine, right? It's only symptomatic treatment. And it is a cause for concern because mortality rates are very high. And we have seen zoonotic jumps taking place. So transmission through contact, exchange of bodily fluids is possible between humans. From one infected person to another, transmission is possible when they are in close contact and when there is exchange of fluids. So it is again a pathogen of concern, right? And that is why studies are being conducted. Genome sequencing studies are being conducted. So the article is talking about the scientific aspect of it. It has a lot of technical details which is not needed for the exam. Just know what is mpox, right? Understand the risks and the concerns. That's more than enough. Next, coming to page number 14. The small article is referring to a devastating flood in China. This flood has been labeled as the flood of the century, once in a century flood. So let's see where the floods have occurred. It could be very important for geography and map-based questions. The flooding has been reported here in southern China in the Pearl River Delta. So you should know where the Pearl River flows through and where does it join. That's the basic details. The Pearl River, found here in South China, right? It feeds Hong Kong, Macau, and all these autonomous provinces that are there, right? And it passes through this part of China and it drains into South China Sea. That's the important point you should note down, right? Nothing else. Where is Pearl River? It's in China. It flows in southern China, covers areas like Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, and it drains into South China Sea. Just know these basic details. The last article for today, not an article, again, an image on page 14. You can see few performers, right, circus and dance performers dressed in red costumes. Now, how is this relevant for the exam? It is very relevant because in this image, you can see a protest against climate change, a protest against environmental destruction by two collective groups called Extinction Rebellion and the Red Rebel Brigade. In the past, UPSC has asked questions about non-state groups or non-state actors. For example, about Amnesty International, about Human Rights Watch, Greenpeace, right, which are human rights and environmental groups. Such organizations can be asked as a prelims question. So when it comes to the fight against climate change, raising environmental issues, there are two important groups that you should be familiar with. One is Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion has become quite notorious in the UK. It was founded in the UK because it believes in a non-violent civil disobedience. To raise environmental matters and bring attention to environmental issues, members of Extinction Rebellion, they conduct these silent marches, protests, and they take sometimes matters into their own hands. Even though they're non-violent, they resort to controversial methods like blocking an event or defacing artwork, right? They try to attract attention through controversial methods of non-violent civil disobedience. So this outfit is called Extinction Rebellion, right? It's a rebellion against possible extinction, which is being triggered by climate change. So they're trying to highlight environmental issues. They're trying to draw the attention of the government and the world towards environmental problems through controversial methods. The second group is the Red Rebel Brigade. You can see the image here. Red Rebel Brigade is a group of performers. There are dancers, there are circus professionals. They use their skill, their art, to depict environmental problems. All right, they dance, they perform these gymnastics and circus tricks, right, to highlight environmental issues, and they are dressed in red. So this is the Red Rebel Brigade. Just know the names of these groups and what is their main agenda or main objective. That is more than sufficient. So this completes the discussion for today. I have given 2 practice questions for your answer writing practice. Please note them down and try to write answers and post them in the comment section below. So with this, I complete my discussion for today. Don't forget, at 1 p.m. we are starting a new special class where you understand the impact of geography on geopolitics, how geography defines geopolitics. So join me on the Unacademy app at 1 p.m. If you like the session today, let me know in the comments. Share the video with other aspirants and press the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.